Okay, folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and we have with us Mike Gonzalez. He's the author of BLM, Black Lives Matter, subtitled The Making of a New Marxist Revolution. And this brother is senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he also served in two different capacities with the George W. Bush administration. Obviously, he's a man of tremendous accomplishment, so we'll probably be here another 10 minutes talking about all the great things he's done. But as you know, this is a 10-15 minute interview, so let's go straight into it. Mike, it says here, actually, you know, I read one of your articles, and you said something that really stood out with me. You said that the major media in the United States, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I quote here, ignores the intent and purpose of Black Lives Matter. Did I get that right?
Yeah, Corbin. I mean, that's actually why I wrote BLM, because the media, and the reason why it's imponderable, right? I mean, we can be here all day and try to guesstimate as to why the media does this, but they do not report on what the founders of BLM say they want to do. They do not report on their background. They do not report on the things they have done, who has trained them. And I don't know why that is. We can speculate only. and that is today, despite the appearance of scandals, they have bought mansions with the money. People, the fathers and mothers of the slain Black Americans in whose name they say they're acting, have complained they haven't seen any money, and the media continues to not report on it. I don't think the New York Times has written a single article on the housing scandal. The Washington Post has had one opinion column by Karen Attiah, of all people, because she was very, very praiseful of Black Lives Matters before, and the networks haven't done anything, and MSNBC, of course, will not do anything, nor with CNN. And by the way, just very, very briefly, because I think this is important, Corbin,
Yes,
to
sir.
say at the outset that I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter, the concept. You know, those English words, I attach myself to them. Black Lives Matter to me. I say Black Lives Matter. I don't say all lives matter, even though I agree that all 7 billion of us on earth are the children of God. And I especially like my 330 million compatriots. But it's important, I think, to say Black Lives Matter because of a history. You and I don't need to discuss the history. We all know it.
Yes.
It's the organizations and their founders. That's what my book is about. The media pretends it's a concept or a movement. It's the organization that receives the millions of dollars in donations. It's the organizations which organizes the protests and the riots. It's the organizations with the curriculum. It's the organizations with the bills in Congress. It's the organizations I write about in my book, BLM, The Making of a New Marxist Revolution.
Now, let's talk a little bit about, you know, you had mentioned the founders, et cetera. I remember when Black Lives Matter first put up a website, and if I remember correctly, they stated very clearly that their founders are Marxist trained in Marxism. They're very proud of that, put that out there. They're anti-capitalist and anti-nuclear family. And I vaguely remember the part about they stayed in their anti-nuclear family. They took that down. I mean, is this something that they've attempted to hide now, or are they still sort of quite open about their Marxist roots and their interest in the socialist revolution, et cetera?
Yeah, quite right. What you say about the family. On the website of Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which is BLM. When I say BLM, I mean the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, the mothership, the flagship of the enterprise, founded by Patrisse Cullors, Alicia Garza, Paul Tamedi, etc., and Melina Abdullah. On their website until about September 2020, they had their 13 principles, and I believe it was principle number 9 that said they wanted to dismantle the Western-oriented nuclear family. They were very open about this. I wrote an article for the New York Post about this, and then I reposted it on the website of the Heritage Foundation, and on the Heritage Foundation site alone, it received over 1 million reads. So I don't know how many reads it got in the New York Post, and we had a video, received a lot of attention on the video as well. So about 2 months after I did this, by the way, I had a co-author, Andy Olivastro, who's very good, my colleague and friend here at Heritage. And about 2 or 3 months, no, actually it was a month after our article, which was widely read, they got rid of the 13 principles. It was they pure Stalinists. Yes. They airbrushed things out. However, what's interesting is on the website of their curriculum, they're affiliated with those the curriculums, Black Lives Matter at School. Black Lives Matter at School, if you go on the website, they have 13 principles, and you find getting rid of the family being sent out to little children. And I think it's still, the last time I checked, it was still on the website of the very powerful Los Angeles chapter, which was run by Melina Abdullah, also a Marxist. So they only took it out of the main BLM site. They forgot about a couple of other sites.
Wow, that's and you know, I bring that up because I have run into several Black ministers who say, oh, they emphatically support Black Lives Matter, and when I bring up to them, well, I guess you support the position that they're opposed to the nuclear family, and they sort of stumble and as if they didn't realize, oh, that's what they stand for. But you here in your book, you clearly document that.
Oh yeah, and as I said, people listening here and watching here can go to Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and see their website and see how they still say that, or they can go to Black Lives Matter at School and see where they still say that.
Right. Now, here in your book, again, Black Lives Matter, the making of a new Marxist revolution. What do you mean by new Marxist revolution?
It's new in many ways. One of the main ways in which is new, there's a next gen Marxism out there, which is cultural. And that starts in the 70s and 80s when they start reading, pieces that were books that were written in the 20s and 30s by Antonio Gramsci, in which he says, well, all of the things Marx wants to do. By the way, Marx is the first one that says abolish the family. Yes. The manifesto says abolish the family, and the family is a big target of all communists since then. BLM are not the first communists that want to get rid of the family. The family blocks their drive to change society, because the family is the basic societal institution that supports society. So they must get rid of it. Anyway, Gramsci said, yes, by all means, let's abolish the family, let's abolish the nation state, let's abolish private property, especially, and let's abolish God. All these things are true. However, we can't do it the way Russia did it with a revolution in countries where civil society is strong. We need to go at the culture, take over the cultural institutions, infiltrate the culture, indoctrinate people, because they have become their own oppressors. They have bought into the bourgeoisie's hegemonic narrative. We need to do an indoctrinating labor for many years. And that is the kind of Marxism that BLM practices. And as a kind of Marxism the BLM practices, because they were trained by people like that. Patrice Couleurs was trained for 10 years, well before Trayvon Martin, well before they came up with a BLM. She was trained by Eric Mann, who's a former member of the Weather Underground, a terrorist organization in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Weather Underground was identified by the FBI as a terrorist group. Eric Mann was a member of it. He served time in prison. He got out in the 80s. He established his Labor Community Strategy Center in Los Angeles, where he trains. He says in his book, he recruits Patrice Couleurs at the young age of 17. He trains her for 10 years on how to organize and convince people that America is oppressive and so forth. Yes. Alicia Garza, whom you also mentioned, Corbin, another co-founder, along with Patrice Couleur is one of the two main co-founders. She was trained at the School of Unity and Liberation founded by Harmony Goldberg. Harmony Goldberg is a cultural anthropologist who happens to be an expert on Gramsci, whom I just described to you.
Mhm.
She's an expert on Gramsci. She writes very good papers on Gramsci, and she recruits Alicia Garza. For heaven's sakes, why don't people write about this?
Yes, yes. Well, fortunately, you've put it there in your book, BLM, The Making of a New Marxist Revolution. I'm speaking to Mike Gonzalez. And sir, we can get your book, at Amazon.com and other places?
Amazon, Encounter, which is my publisher, encounter.com. Amazon is where it sells very well at the moment. I see my role as exposing this because the media will not expose it.
Yes. And let me just say this. My listeners have heard this before, but I wanted to say it again. I am a former Marxist. Everything you're saying, have said in this interview and in your book is dead on. One of the nation's leading Marxist scholars, the late Dr. Manning Marable, would teach me a lot about that Italian Marxist you brought up, Antonio Gramsci. And this was years back. This was like 50 pounds ago for me. And he talked a lot about him. The abolition of the family, when I was, again, a Marxist, it was there in Marxist literature, and Marx and Engels wrote this pamphlet on the abolition of the family, that the children should belong to the state, etc.
Yes.
Yeah. So
What's his
everything.
name? Manning.
Yeah, Dr. Marable Manning, Manning. He used to do a national column called From the Grassroots. He also wrote a book. He's written several great books, but one of them was How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America. And he also wrote probably one of the best books on Malcolm X.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll look him up.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, he was a powerful guy. And when I say I was educated by him, I mean, man, I brought him to campus several times. We spent many hours together.
Well, Corbin, you have to read the Marxists. You
Yes.
have to read the communists. You have to read the manifesto. I'll go even further, Corbin. You have to put yourself, or try to, in their shoes. People are seldom evil for being evil.
Mhm.
You have to understand why they're doing the things they do. You did it. You believed in this. You're
Yes.
not an evil person. You weren't evil then. You were just misguided. I won't describe who
Yes.
you were. You're better at describing it. But I think, to understand, because I think communism is evil, but you have to understand the people who preach it and practice it and try to implement it in order to defeat it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's why this is why I do what I do, because I was there. I studied those guys. I know those guys. I ran with them. And I just reached a point in my life. I said, this is absurd. Even when I was involved in it, I'll never forget, we were at some little party and we were talking about the Cuban Revolution. And I said, well, they don't practice free speech. And they argued against free speech. They
Right.
basically argued against the concept of free speech.
Right.
So that's when I began to realize, wait a minute, if I ever sort of viewed as being on the wrong side, my rear end is going to be up in the gulag or something like that.
Right. Which is what they do to their own people. Right.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, I don't want to get off. This is not about.
No, this is but I love your story. I love to talk to you about your story. Maybe I should interview you.
No. So again, speaking to my listeners now, this is Mike Gonzalez. He's the author of BLM, The Making of a New Marxist Revolution. Please get this book. Please read this book. And you know what, folks? This is graduation season. I strongly recommend, highly recommend, please buy a copy of this and give it to the college graduate in your family. Give this as a gift to the college graduate, high school graduate in your family. I wish I had received it when I graduated from a college. Sir, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I hope and pray that we might be able to do it again sometime.
That is very nice of you, Corbin. I'm indebted to you. God bless you today. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.